He's getting itchy with the, I just grabbed the, go ahead. I shouldn't make jokes. Okay. I officially call this meeting to order on June 10th, 2025. City Council discussion only meeting. Madam Clerk, please proceed with the roll call.
Councilmember Altman.
Here.
Councilmember Meadows.
Here.
Councilmember Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Singh.
Here.
Mayor Brookover.
All right. Any motions?
I'd like to make a motion to excuse the mayor's absence.
Support.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Next up, approval of the agenda this evening.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Councilmember Watson, or I'm sorry, seconded by Watson, moved by Meadows, and all in favor?
Aye.
I'm forgetting to vote, excuse me. Aye, so that's for moving for approval of the agenda. And now we have communications from the audience. I haven't received any slips this evening. Is there anyone that would like to speak? No one here in the room? Anyone in the queue?
There are no callers in the queue.
No one in the queue. So now we're moving next to communication from council members. We'll start with Council Member Altman.
No report, thank you.
Next, Councilman Meadows.
No report this evening.
My gosh. All right, Councilwoman Dana
Pass.
Watson. Excuse me.
It's all right, pass.
Okay, everyone's passing. I, too, will have no report this evening. So let's kick it over to our city manager for any report.
I have no report this evening.
No report either. Now, we are moving on to agenda item 6.1, discussion items. And that is discussion of noise issues. And I'm going to have Councilwoman Watson kick this discussion off.
Sure. So, as you all know, a number of people have come forward regarding the noise in our community, and a number of us have expressed different things we think should be addressed. And so I thought this was a good time, again, to try to talk about what the city can do and what the city cannot do as far as noise ordinances, and maybe possibly move it forward in some better directions, or at least have some understanding amongst ourselves and amongst the community of how far we can go with noises that bother individuals.
Thank you. And I know our city manager prepared a memo in front of us. I don't know if there's items that you would want to brief us before we continue forth in the discussion.
Well, I just wanted to kind of recap. So we started discussing this last December and then brought it forward under a couple of meetings. And, with the COVID period where there was very little traffic, little activities, everybody got used to the peace and quiet. And then, of course, we went back to normal. And then the rise of remote work, changing expectations for noise and air quality brought us to these conversations. And so on page 22 of your agenda packet is reference to section 44-200. And it really gets into the requirements for vehicles. And it indicates the requirement to do a decimal read of 90 dBAs if the maximum lawful speed on the highway or street is greater than 35 miles, 86 if it's not more than 35, and then 80 for stationary run-up tests. So ELPD did some research. Most communities don't use a decimal reader to address vehicle noise. After checking with Lansing and Ann Arbor, it is a challenge to get a read off of a vehicle because they have to be in a stopped position, and most of the noise happens when they're driving. And so I know there's this frustration among our residents about how do we resolve the loud noises associated with vehicles? Either, some of the information that came out was drag racing, tires squealing, loud car, music from cars, all were on some of the logs that the LPD provided on calls that they're getting from residents that they have. And each one of those were like one complaint during the period of time. So it is an issue that we're trying to address, but in order to be effective, especially on drag racing or tire squealing, you need more police officers out on the streets. And so we're attempting to do that by filling our vacancies. We have 2 vacant positions. We have 2 positions that are currently in the academy. And then we have 4 more going to the academy in August, which, if all goes well, would graduate in December. And then they go through a minimum 4-month training period of time for FTO training here in the city. So I don't know if Chief Brown wants to speak to that in greater length, but that's our challenge. I note yesterday at staff meeting, we talked about, some of the noise are modified mufflers, some are just defective mufflers. Some of the defective mufflers may be because people can't afford to get that muffler replaced. And I know that interim Chief Pride back in December of last year indicated that, the city could consider creating a fund that sets money aside for those that are struggling financially to take the ticket revenue generated from those tickets to help assist in addressing noise. That's one solution. From straight out enforcement to that, or to provide what we used to call, and I don't know if they call it as fix-it tickets. You give them a period of time to address the defect and get it repaired, and hopefully have some type of resolution to this problem of vehicle noise. Party noises are easy to address.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry, Mr. Bellman, to interrupt you. I'm hoping that we can have specific discussions about things, and I would like to ask some questions and have some dialogue around what you just said regarding the cars and the noises. And my first question, and then I'll pass to whoever, is what page is the information that talks about the calls into the police about cars?
So on page 77 of the 84 items under this agenda is the East Lansing Calls for Service report.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask the city manager to complete his thought?
So it's just, those are some of the conversations that we're having internally on how we can resolve the issues that we're hearing regarding. Some is direct enforcement. Again, if they're drag racing or squealing their tires, those are intentional, and law enforcement there to cite and enforce those laws. If it's a defective equipment, again, balancing as to whether the defective or was it modified intentionally, and still, again, citing to address those issues and really bring it to the forefront.
I'm so confused about what item you're talking about for the calls. So how many calls have there been to the police regarding vehicle noise?
So under the first agenda item,
You
For
said
t-
page 77.
tonight's, let me get there too. So
I see loud music, I see partying.
so if you go down the list, it's not in any alphabetical order.
Right, but then I see number is 1.
Exactly. So there are various, for drag racing, tire squealing, loud car, music, there were only 1 complaint on each of those 4 items. Most of their complaints have been dealing with parties or loud music.
Okay.
And we know that we've had residents come up and speak to us, but I'm not sure our residents are calling in to document through the police department their concerns about some vehicle noise, be it a motorcycle or cars.
So then the data on call-ins doesn't back up the concern that the police can address regarding loud vehicles, because the police are not being turned to for loud vehicles.
That is one of the problems, that we are not being notified by our residents of those loud vehicle noises that have come and shared their experiences at the podium at prior meetings. Yes.
What data supports that hires of police officers drives down loud vehicles when I'm hearing a conflictual report that we can't address it? The police can't address the loud vehicle. So what data backs up that more police bodies in a community reduces loud vehicles in the state of Michigan?
I'm not suggesting more. I'm suggesting that we get staff to the level this body has authorized them in their budget.
So I have a couple follow-ups, if I may. So, because I too I'm looking at the call data. Couple things come to mind. One is, I know we've had a few folks come to the podium to talk about loud noise in general, and more so than it would reflect in the data in terms of calls that on cars producing loud noise. We've heard more from the podium over time. But there's a number of different loud music rows, and how can we reflect on those? Should the data actually be added to one row?
I'll let the chief speak to that on the consolidation of that report that comes out of the system.
I had this data pulled directly from SRMS, which is our state records management system data. So if we want to dig into the data deeper, I'd be happy to. So if you want to know exactly where the music was coming from in terms of, for example, loud bass and loud music, we would need to dig into that call within SRMS and determine if it was coming from a house or someone on a bike or someone in a vehicle.
And so is this literally an officer, you get a call in, you send an officer out, and then them from their vehicle or in the field, they put in the data?
This is the information that came from dispatch. And so
Okay.
we would then need to go into the call notes
Gotcha.
to see exactly what type of music the source was.
And then my other thing is, I was looking through the ordinance language that our city attorney put together is, I was trying to, if we don't have a way of actually monitoring noise levels, even from parties, is that correct?
No, I mean, we could monitor the standard for parties is much easier to monitor and to address than it is for the vehicle.
But we have a device that
We
does
do have a
that?
device.
Okay, for parties, but because of the nuances with cars, in terms of being on or hitting the
Stationary
gas.
at the time, and you have to be 50 feet away to take the read. And so some of the noise that I understand is when they're accelerating or driving and not when they're stationary. And I don't know if you can speak to that.
That's from my understanding as well.
So no cars can be pulled over for having loud exhausts.
Correct, under the ordinance.
Okay.
Other questions, Councilman Altman?
Yeah, so we have an ordinance on the books, Ordinance 1541, that effectively legalizes loud exhaust in East Lansing. That probably has something to do, that may have something to do with the lack of calls, because people know that there's no point in calling about something there's no point in complaining to police about something that's legalized. I think that ordinance sends the wrong message. I recognize that there are issues with enforcement of noise from cars given state law as it stands now. But ordinances are not just about enforcement, they're also about communication. They tell our community what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And that makes a difference. So about 12 years ago, there was actually a very similar noise issue here in East Lansing. The state had just legalized use of fireworks, unregulated use of fireworks, which had been unlawful for decades. And when that happened, a lot of people took advantage, especially in neighborhoods close to campus, and it was really loud and really disruptive. And the state law that legalized fireworks left it to municipal. A bunch of us got together and urged the city council to regulate fireworks. And city council passed an ordinance, I think that was 2013. And the city did a good job on communications and made sure that everybody knew about it. And the community took it to heart. And so that's how I learned, in context of a noise issue, okay, that ordinances have an important communication function. People have been asking the council for help with loud cars for several years now. They started before this current council was elected, but they've certainly continued since the current council was elected. They've been asking us for help in so many words. People said that from the podium. And the only action we've taken is actually legalize the nuisance, right, with Ordinance 1541. We said it's okay to have loud cars. So I think we need to fix this. I think this is a problem of our own making, and I think we need to fix it. I want to emphasize that it's not just drag racing that causes noise problems. If somebody with a muffler designed to sound like gunshots drives through my neighborhood at the speed limit, it's still going to wake people up and terrify the dogs, okay, because that's what the car is designed to do at some level. So it's not just speeding, it's its own problem. So I would like to repeal the loud exhaust provision of Ordinance 1541, not the other provisions, but just the loud exhaust provision. And I would like to ask, so that procedurally, to get an item on a business agenda for a vote requires 2 council members, okay, which is fine, perfectly reasonable procedure. But what it means is that tonight I'm asking for support from another council member to get that item on a business meeting agenda for a vote. And what that item would be is a repeal of the loud exhaust provision of Ordinance 1541.
Comment?
You second?
No, I have a comment.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
So, Councilmember Altman, you are regularly dismissive of me, but this is a discussion. So if you don't want to have the discussion with me, that's fine. That's on you. That's a reflection of you. But I came here tonight. This is a discussion meeting to talk about things, not to be regularly dismissed by you. So as you were speaking, you kind of bounced around between fireworks and the problem being solved, but I don't even see fireworks being called in. And so then it implies that an ordinance solves the problem, not the police. And so I just want to reflect back some of the things that I heard. And I don't believe in working as hard as we did to have the conversation about the exhausts that a poor person might have, and we came to a decision that we bring it back up 3 months later because it didn't go in someone's favor. I think it's disrespectful because the Ellipot Commission worked hard on that, then we worked hard through deep conversation and lots of questions, and it landed where it did. And it still doesn't say that that's going to solve the problems. This happened, this was passed maybe a year ago, I don't know, but it didn't show that the community was benefiting because it was in the books and people were getting pulled over for it. So agree to disagree, and like I said, I don't expect to get respect from you.
Councilmember.
But I also want to talk about the items that are on this agenda, which, and particularly Section 2681, because I want to make sure that I understand exactly how the police are looking at this and who is doing the enforcement with regard to Section 2681. I read this as already having some pretty basic ways to enforce noise that is in the neighborhoods and actually on the streets. So right here, it says that if noise is plainly audible off the property line and it's coming from amplified music of some kind, it's a violation. You just have to stand on the sidewalk, and you can tell whether there's a violation taking place. If you're talking about a vehicle, it's 50 feet from the vehicle. It's put in the ordinance. 50 feet from the vehicle. If you can hear it there, you can write a ticket on it. It talks about a muffler or other device effectively preventing loud or explosive noises. This ordinance is not the ordinance that we changed. So it is still on the books that it can be enforced with regard to mufflers or lack thereof. You know, when we talk about drag racing, I don't really see that as an item relating to noise in any way whatsoever. I think drag racing is a dangerous activity which we have the ability to write tickets regarding for reckless driving or careless driving. And I suspect that's the way the police department actually enforces that. So I don't have any problem with us discussing this. I think it's an important discussion. I can tell you that, a few nights ago I was sitting on the patio at the Peanut Barrel, and literally all conversation had to stop as a car roared by with such a loud noise. Of course, they roared by one way and then came back the other way a little bit later, but it happens. And it's something that, I think we do have to address within the community. I've said before, I live like 75 feet from Abbott Road, and I can tell you there are nights when the windows rattle when somebody goes by, usually on a motorcycle. So those things are happening in the community. We probably need to address those. I'm not exactly sure how the right way to. In the past, I know the Mayor Pro Tem likes me saying that. In the past,
Back in my
I
day,
do
actually,
remember
is the
us
phrase.
having a discussion about these handheld, noise things, and that each car, might have one in them. We used that with regard to party noise in the past, not so much with regard to vehicles. And there's the other problem with enforcement, which is that it's noisy, my windows rattle. If I get on the phone and say, hey, there's somebody out on the street who's caused all this noise, they're long gone. There's no way to really enforce this that way. So we need to take a look at this. We need to have a debate with regard to it and make sure that what we have on the books is the effective way, maybe an efficient and effective way for us to control this. There are some things that we are not going to be able to do, and we should recognize that right now. But there are things that maybe we could improve.
All right. And I noticed we also have shouting and whistling, continuous and repeated yelling, which at first when I read that, I was like, I had to read the details to make sure it made sense with partying noises, perhaps. I do want to go back to staffing before we let the chief go from the table, but Congressman, I just promoted a Congresswoman.
I'll take it.
We do need somebody in the 7th district.
Yeah, calling out candidates. Dr. Altman.
Thanks. So a couple of comments. One is about enforcement. One of the sort of eerie similarities between the fireworks situation and the loud car situation is that you had enforcement issues with fireworks as well, because a police officer would have to see somebody set off the fireworks, but nobody's going to be dumb enough to do that. So the fireworks go off somewhere, and then you got to chase them down. By the time you get there, there's nobody there anymore. So as I think I mentioned earlier, in the discussions leading up to that fireworks ordinance, enforcement did come up, and people recognized that it was going to be tricky to enforce, but at the same time, they also recognized the communicative value of ordinances. And so that's why they were not deterred by that, and I'm glad they weren't. I did want to mention that, if we want to, what we should maybe do sometime is on a nice warm night in the fall, is have one of our business meetings on Grand River. Maybe on a Friday night would be even better. And we can see whether we get to a 2-hour meeting without being interrupted repeatedly because we can't hear ourselves talking because of loud cars. That's a challenge I put out there. I did want to ask the chief about enforcement. Mark mentioned Section 2681 and that there were options for police to enforce loud exhaust from cars. And my impression from what I heard when I went to the police academy is that essentially no officer is going to pull somebody over for loud exhaust with Ordinance 1541 on the books as is. And so my question for the chief is, how do police view loud cars?
They view the ordinance that was passed in November, and that is a violation to make a vehicle stop for that as a primary reason. And so they avoid those types of stops.
And so they're not going to pull anybody over for loud exhaust for that
Correct.
reason. So, we sit up here and we sort of make noises like we pretend about this issue, but then we've told police, hands off, right? So we're sending a mixed message to our community. We're telling violators that it's fine, right, to have a muffler that sounds like gunshots. We're telling the rest of the community that their concerns don't really matter, and we're telling the police that, we sort of say we want enforcement, but we're erecting a barrier to them doing their jobs, which I think puts them in a bind. We expect them to do their jobs, but we make it more difficult for them. I don't think that's fair to them, and it's not productive for the community either. So I'm gonna, I guess, repeat my request. I take Councilmember Meadows' comments as support for putting a repeal of just that provision on a business meeting agenda at some point in the future. But he can correct me if I'm wrong about that.
No, I don't have a problem with us debating anything. So I'm always willing to put things back on the agenda or on a future agenda involving anything so that we can discuss whether we continue it, whether we keep it, whether there's a way to improve it, or whether there's a way that we didn't anticipate would be a problem with regard to it.
And then I just want to make sure from a procedural standpoint, the expression of 2 members of council to the mayor triggers getting it on the agenda. We don't formally vote on anything at a discussion meeting, is that correct?
You don't have to know.
Okay.
So, Councilmember Meadows, this feels like what's happening currently with the federal administration, which is you take a seat and you erase and rip up all the hard work that other people did because you don't agree with it. And so you're leading us back down a path where we're gonna vote for something again, right?
I'm taking us down a path to talk about whether we would go forward with something
There would
again.
be a motion.
Somebody would make a motion, and if there was a motion and a second, then we would take a vote. If there's no second,
Yeah.
we don't take a vote.
But you're kind of seconding it today, so it kind of feels like
I'm
you
not
might.
seconding anything. I'm simply saying I don't have a problem with that being on the agenda. If you were to want something on the agenda, I'd probably say I don't have a problem with that going on the agenda.
Thank you for that, and thank you for being open to a discussion with me, because that's what discussion meetings amongst council is supposed to be like. In your deep history with the city, how often is it that y'all voted for something and then decided 3 months down the line to vote for it again?
I don't know that I recall us voting twice on something, after a period of time, but we have reviewed things that we have done in the past and changed them.
Right, probably with
on
discussion
previous
and
occasions.
consent.
And
Yeah.
that has happened a number of times while I've been on council.
But not that we went back for a same vote that originally we agreed with because someone didn't get what it was they wanted. So we re-bring it back up 3 months down the line, 7 months down the line, to see if it lands differently.
But we may not be voting on exactly the same thing.
I know you say that, but I'm gonna mark your words, okay?
You should always mark my words.
Thank you.
That's why they call me Mark.
All right.
There's no
And I
drum
was
rolls
thinking, since we're joking now, we could have that business meeting at Pizza Walla.
Yes.
That's on Grand River.
I think we put all ideas on the table this evening.
Thank
I think
you.
That's good. Two things, and maybe Chief, you can help educate me. When I think of loud muffler noise, I think there has to, like in this day and age, generally, when I hear loud muffler noise, it seems to be cars that have been fitted, and I don't know if they're racing but, and again, I'm not an auto nerd or whatever the
Neither.
right term is, geek, whatever, all those good things. But is that true? I mean, I feel like in the new equipment on vehicles generally, mufflers tend to hold out longer than they used to. I know when I first started driving.
I think the vast majority of concerns you've heard here at City Council have to do with aftermarket changes to the vehicle, which increases the sound associated with the muffler.
And are they speeding, or can they make that noise not speeding?
They can make it as they rev
Or
up
are they
and speed.
just rev and aren't moving? Okay, that helps me. Thank you. I did want to go back to staffing that I know our city manager kind of outlined our latest stats, but I know this plays in, enforcement is one tool in the toolbox. And, we've had a lot of traffic concerns outside of what's before us this evening. So can you walk through the timeline? I think there are currently 2 vacancies, but there are currently 4 folks in the academy, or
So
did
we
I already
have-
screw this up?
We have 2 in the academy currently. One is in Washtenaw County and one is in Oakland County. We have 4 tentatively scheduled to start in August at the Mid-Michigan Police Academy here in Lansing. I say tentative because the 4th person out of the 4 is still in the conditional stage of the process, meaning that we have not completed his background investigation and other requirements. We just made a conditional offer to him last week.
Okay, and when these officers are in the academy, are they also working hours alongside officers, or not until they complete their work at the academy?
So they complete the academy first, and that is an approximately 4-month process. So for example, the ones that will be starting in August, they complete the academy the 2nd week of December. Usually the last 2 weeks of December, because of the holidays, are spent reviewing policies, internal procedures, that sort of thing. We start them in the field training program in January of that following year, and at minimum, that program is a 4-month program. So even though we talk today about having 6 officers going through training, first the police academy and then the field training, we're talking a good 10, 12 months before we see them on the road working solo.
So, and just to follow, if there were no further retirements or resignations, we would be at full staff capacity, officer capacity at what, March of next year, later? May?
It would be April of next year at the earliest, meaning end of April, but then we factually know that there will be retirements this year. We've
Okay.
already received 1 notification of a retirement in August, and we have 2 potential retirements in October, and then a 4th that has not been announced, but we know he's retiring this year.
Now, how early do you start recruiting, recognizing?
It's ongoing. We
You
never
have
stop
3 more.
recruiting because we know of this potential turnover. We want to get ahead of it and make sure that we're getting as many folks as we can because we know those retirements are occurring.
Okay, thank you. I thank you for spending the time
Yeah,
on
of
this
course.
because I know it's come up a few different times, whether it's through our budget process or other issues before us that, when we will be at full capacity, but it's always a moving target when life happens and people work their tenure and are ready to retire. So I appreciate that. I'm ready to move on to the next item. If folks are,
Just a few more
yes,
things.
ma'am.
I think my philosophy on being an elected person for this community is different from other people on this council. So there's the people that get us in to seat ourselves. But then I think it's my job to listen to different angles and different opinions on what's happening. But to also think about who's being left out of the conversation. So yes, we were able to have a discussion about loud vehicles, but we look at this data and the complaints for noise are coming from parties, which is something that I've mentioned. And so then you have an opportunity to maybe just ride the coattails of people who are complaining because it aligns with whatever it is you're trying to do or undo in the community. And I just want to say, just to round it up, it is my philosophical perspective as an elected official that once I take my seat, I am responsible and responsive to most community members, not just to ones that align with what I think should or should have happened. Because it's weird to see once again that loud music is at the top of this, but we've not discussed that at all. We've decided because the community has shown up to discuss loud cars that that should be our only discussion. I wasn't able to talk about the leaf blowers because again, I think this is a picking and choosing of who, what culture, what types of folks we have problems with and writing that as opposed to what do the facts show us? What does the data say? And when have we driven something down because we've hired more police officers regarding noise? Thank you.
Go ahead, Councilmember Meadows.
I want to actually respond to that because I do think we need to have a conversation with regard to the leaf blowers as part of the whole noise thing, and that's why I think we need to revisit this. This isn't enough for this evening's conversation. I also want to just note a couple of things from the operating procedures, because every council member has the individual right to ask the city attorney to prepare legislation. They have the right as a single person to ask that it be on a discussion agenda. And so the fact that there's been a request for something to be on the business agenda takes two people, but it could easily be on a discussion agenda prior to that time. And we don't need anybody to help us do the job that you have identified. I think you're doing it exactly the right way. If you are identifying those things that you feel need to be on this table for discussion, they should be on the table. And we each have a right to make sure that that happens. So if you feel that that is not being afforded to you, I feel that we need to have that discussion about that as well. Those operating procedures were designed to provide the ability of every council member to listen to the public and make a point or have legislation prepared so that the council can discuss it. And if that's not happening, we need to make sure that it does happen. We have that right to do that.
Well, I'd be happy to work with Councilmember Watson, because when I look at our memo from our city attorney, it just lists the ordinances that impact or talk about noise, but they are not always, it would be better to understand what would incorporate leaf blowers or other noise like that, as that example that you just mentioned. I think there's also, and I know Councilmember Meadows referenced this in terms of the pretextual stop ordinance that we adopted versus how that actually may preclude or not preclude noisy mufflers at what instance. So I think actually having a deeper level analysis conversation would be helpful on this topic. So I would at least offer that up. And Councilmember Altman, did I see your hand?
A couple of comments about leaf blowers. So I'm also happy to talk about leaf blowers. This is something that the Commission on the Environment talked about, and I think one of the reasons I brought that up initially is because they've done enough research that I thought we had a pretty good policy basis for actually potentially moving ahead with a phased phase out of leaf blowers. At the same time, that we're not hearing about leaf blowers from the podium. We're not getting emails. We're getting some emails, but not as many emails as we are about loud cars. There's a certain urgency to that problem because it's a public nuisance that provokes anxiety in people and affects our pets and is just not fair at multiple levels. And so there's a certain urgency to the loud car issue that is what motivates me to take that up, especially since we did exactly the opposite of what the community asked for. Right? The community asked for help with this issue, and we legalized a nuisance. And so I think that was a mistake, and I think that a body needs to be able to revisit decisions it's made and acknowledge when it made mistakes. I'm happy to consider to keep talking about leaf blowers. I'm a little concerned that in terms of community-wide that we're getting a little bit ahead of where the community is on this issue, and that it may sort of take a longer discussion to get people's heads wrapped around the idea that this is a tool that they use in their yards that they might not be able to use after a while, and see whether people are okay with that. So again, I'm happy to continue that discussion, but I think the urgency for the loud cars issue is considerably greater.
All right.
I'll just
Mr.
add
Mills.
one thing, because I know we've been through this a little bit with air conditioner units a few years ago, where we got a little bit ahead of the community in regulating that noise, and I think we stepped back on that if you're looking for an example.
I do have one more
Yes,
question,
ma'am.
sorry, for you, Chief Brown. I light firecrackers on my property. If someone called the police saying that I was blowing up firecrackers on an off day, and you came by, what would happen?
They would typically educate the community in terms of what the ordinance is.
Or if it was me. So if it's me, I blow up firecrackers, it's a day I'm not supposed to be. My neighbors call and say, she's blowing up firecrackers. So would you come by?
I personally probably wouldn't come by, but an officer would get dispatched to your residence, and we would educate you on what the ordinance is and what days that you can do fireworks.
Okay, so not really tickets.
Correct. We try to educate first.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that you could find evidence of fireworks, that's all.
I'm sorry, what is the question?
If you came by and I said, no, I wasn't lighting fireworks, and you were like, yes, you were, there was a report, and that you guys can find evidence of the fireworks.
We
if
can
you
always
want to.
seek charges. That's always an option for the officers. But again, if you're not lighting them off in front of us, then, likely we would go down the education route.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. As a means to transition, and it would be better if we were at a board table so I could see everyone a little bit more easily. However, that is, I know. If we could change the whole makeup of the room while the mayor's out this evening. With that said, moving on to agenda item 6.2, discussion for the establishment of the El Fresco Social District, PA 124-2020. And we're welcoming Marcia Grabrowski. No, say it one more time.
It's Gaborowski.
Okay. If I say Marcia G, is that offensive or?
No, Marsha G is fine.
Okay. Okay. I'm just looking for options. Thank you. So we'll kick it off over to you for this discussion. Hold on, just.
So I am to help with a little bit of context and to help me keep on track with a presentation. I did create a couple of slides easy to follow. But first, I will ask my colleague Heather Pope to give a little bit of context around the outdoor dining initiatives and how we've come to what a social district is, and then what the proposed next steps that staff is investigating.
That sounds great.
Good evening, council members. So back in 2020, as part of the DDA support for the downtown businesses, what we created was Ordinance 1486, which authorized 3 different areas within the community in the downtown area, where individuals could, where they could get takeout and packaged alcohol purchased and could bring that into one of these areas. The pilot at that time was to use Albert Avenue. Albert Avenue at that time was not considered Albert al Fresco. We closed it to allow, if you recall at that time, restaurants had to have 50% occupancy, so we closed that area to allow the businesses to expand out into the street. And we did this pilot with allowing like an outdoor food court is what it became. So you could bring food out there, or you could purchase packaged liquor from appropriate licensed businesses to come out. We set up 19 picnic tables, the type that you see throughout our parks in the downtown, and that's what we did throughout that that summer. It was from June to August 15th, 2020. It went Monday through Sunday from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. We did have some restrictions of a 2-hour limit, so it didn't become a large gathering place for a large number of people all at the same time. We wanted people to come in, spend some time, and move on. And again, if you recall, there were restrictions about how close you could be to other people, and so we had to work that all into the site plan itself. So. And then how that moved into Albert al Fresco is there was a lot of great feedback about having that road closure. And so the next year, Albert al Fresco became what it is now. We started buying infrastructure, again, supporting those businesses that at this time would be allowed to serve alcohol in their outdoor space. For example, Barrio, as part of their special use permit, they have a designated outdoor seating. Hopcat has outdoor designated seating. Jolly Pumpkin has outdoor seating, which they're allowed to serve alcohol in. And so that continued, but at that time, there was no more just purchasing and walking in that area. That piece of it went away. And at the state level, some things changed, which made it more restrictive of how a community could do that. And so back in 2020, there was a policy resolution that was established which allowed temporary site plan approvals to be completed administratively by our planning and zoning staff. And again, this was again to encourage businesses to have outdoor dining and then go through the process of being able to serve alcohol in those areas. So that continued through a couple of years. There had been feedback on and off about bringing back a social district to that area, and here we are. We've been doing some research over the past year. Some other members of the CED staff had put together some memos and provided information over the past probably 12 months. And so we've shared that all with Marcia to continue down the path of seeing if this is something that council would like to consider bringing back either this year or next year.
So my big goal for this evening is, again, part of consideration is a lot of education and just starting with what a social district is. So the state enacted Public Act 124 of 2020, and that created the social district. It allows communities to designate areas where beverages from licensed establishments can be enjoyed outdoors in specially marked containers. Again, this was introduced in response to the COVID-19 pandemic that supports local businesses, where these outdoor districts grew in popularity, and for many communities across the state, enhanced their downtown atmospheres and enabled outdoor activities. And now it's we're going into 4 or 5 years where a lot of communities have events like we have Alberta Fresco to continue those events as they were initially started. What a social district also means is that all state and local laws regarding things like public intoxication, impaired driving, open alcohol containers do apply within this district and beyond the district. If you could go to the next slide. So a lot of the social district remains in the hands of the Michigan Liquor Control Commission. And there are 2 forms. There's 2 steps in establishing both the district and then enabling licensed establishments to gain a permit for serving in the social district. So what we're researching right now is really just to determine if the city would consider establishing the district. It is completely in local control that the governing body would just have to pass a resolution. The process is pretty simple. In addition to the resolution, before submitting to the Michigan Liquor Control Commission, the city would have a defined map of the boundaries and licensed establishments eligible for a permit. And so that is included in your packet of what that proposed district could look like, as well as a copy of what is called a management and maintenance plan. And the Liquor Control Commission specifically states that it must include hours of operation and days of operation. But in reviewing many other social district plans across the state, I took a lot of best practices in what would be suitable for East Lansing's plan. So that is also attached in your packet. If and when a community approves and passes that resolution, it is filed with the Liquor Control Commission. And then the next step is that any of those eligible businesses within the district must again apply, and that includes seeking a support from the municipality. So there would be a business that would, go before this body to seek approval as part of their permit application. And then they would have to apply. There is a fee that they would have to pay, and that also includes an inspection by the Liquor Control Commission of their premises. Next slide.
May I ask, do we have these slides, Mr. Bowman?
You do not in your packet.
So I just can't see well, and so it's just helpful if I can get the slides so I can follow along. But they are nice and large. That's great. But I'm sorry to interrupt you.
We'll be happy to forward them to you.
Sherry's going to forward them to you, Dana.
Okay.
The social district legislation really does enable a lot of local oversight. So the municipality does have say over the boundaries of the social district. Again, it must be filed with the Liquor Control Commission. The municipality has the ability to rescind the social district. It requires one public hearing before approval of the rescinding of a district. On the flip note, a local municipality has the ability to expand its boundaries as well as create other social districts. So we can have separate social districts within the city. For instance, the city of Lansing does have 4 unique districts. And then there's a lot of local oversight in the operations and maintenance management plan that is completely within local purview. And the statute was amended later in 2020, and that enabled that language was not in the legislation before that amendment. So actually, no, it was amended in 2022, I apologize. So having that local oversight in the operations and management plan is key, that we have, the city has the ability to have one that responds to its own atmosphere. And then the final slide, a lot of research and feedback, having conversations with multiple city departments, having presented to the DDA board, having a part of staff communications during the DMB board last week. There's ongoing outreach to ensure I get 100% response with all of the eligible restaurants that are in the proposed district, as well as outreach from residents both at Newman Lofts, City Center, and other neighborhood associations around to get feedback, and that is slowly trickling in. And then because there have been so many districts established across the state in the last 4 or 5 years, there's a lot of data looking at other social plans, how communities have set these up, have responded, things like that to implement as we've reviewed this possibility.
Wonderful. Who wants to kick off questions? Mr. Altman, Dr. Altman, excuse me.
Thanks. So I have a list of questions in no particular order. So you probably said this and I missed it. Was outdoor alcohol consumption part of the original pre-El Fresco during the pandemic? Because you sort of said that we were thinking about bringing it back, and that means it was there before.
So back in 2020, we closed down Albert Avenue, but it wasn't called Albert Al Fresco. It was just closed down. Department of Public Works brought in, it was 19 picnic tables. We spaced them out, put signage up, went through a process with council at that time in the state. And the state was encouraging communities to do this because it allowed, as I was saying earlier, the occupancy in all the restaurants was cut by 50%, right. And this allowed them to make up some of that occupancy that they were missing. And so we created this space in a gathering area. At that time, it had to be barricaded off, and so it made sense to do it in that area.
And so my follow-up question was going to be sort of, why are we doing this? Who's pressing for it? And it just sounds like it worked then, and it sounds interesting, and so we want to do it again. Is that basically where I'm coming? Is that the basic sort of direction, or are people really pressing for this, or are the businesses pressing for it?
The businesses so far have been completely behind it. A number of them, Jolly Pumpkin, MASH, are regional, so they do have locations in other cities across the state that they do participate in the social district. A good portion, when we get community feedback, when the DMB hosts Albert Al Fresco, they get community survey feedback, and year after year, it has been the desire of participants that take that survey to have the ability to have a beverage along with their meal as they're listening to a band or one of the performances at one of the Albert Al Fresco events.
Concerning liability issues, the staff report, the memo, I think it reads, so I'm looking at the top of the second page. It says, DDA legal counsel confirmed that the DDA nor the city, I think there's maybe a neither that's missing there, that neither the DDA nor the city would be liable in the event of an accident.
That is correct. There's an omission. It's neither the DDA nor the city would be liable.
And we have a memo to that effect from legal counsel?
I would be able to request and obtain that from legal counsel,
Okay.
but that was during our board discussion last week.
Okay. And this would only be for the summer, right?
That is correct.
Thursday through Saturday, I think.
Thursday through Saturday, ending at 10 p.m.
Yep. What does ELPD think?
So their desire was for me to continue outreach to the neighborhood associations to ensure that there is adequate support and just overall what that general feeling is. I got a really good understanding of what the last 4 years since the pandemic has looked like for them in enforcement, but they are absolutely willing to support the district with more feedback.
The police are willing to support with more feedback?
They're willing to, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but through my discussion, they were, thank you, Chief.
That'd be great.
So unfortunately, I too am catching up on this. This was pre me starting the city, but from my understanding, 3 of our lieutenants attended a meeting last week. And so from a historical perspective, the 1 year in which there was alcohol allowed, from my understanding, there was significant problems. And that was associated with individuals not purchasing the alcohol from the restaurants and bars that wanted to benefit from that, buying it from 7-Eleven or another liquor store and putting it in the cups. And people weren't, giving the businesses the money for food and alcohol. They were simply just down there drinking, and it led to problems because it was just simply a space for people to drink alcohol that led to other issues such as fights and stuff. From my understanding, that was one of our highest summers in terms of crime rate.
And-
But to Marcia's point, we're willing to look at it and willing to have those discussions, and we're curious as to what the business owners, beyond just the two that she mentioned, have in terms of their opinion.
And so if we try it and we find the same trend, then we can always rescind it the following year if it becomes too much of a problem, presumably, right?
That is correct. And I do want to point out, the ordinance that enabled the alcohol consumption in open dining areas was not part of the PA 124. So that was actually enacted at the state level after our open air dining ordinance was passed here at the city. So having the special cups and having only licensed restaurants and bars is a new process that the social district brings.
Got it. So is it possible that some of those sorts of changes in the process could actually help with enforcement? Or is that simply too early to tell?
I mean, certainly could help with enforcement. We don't have the bodies to become the cup police is the problem. As you know, we're struggling already, and so that would be a concern in terms of who would provide that enforcement of where the people are purchasing the alcohol. From my understanding, and again, I'm still catching up to this, is that there are certain cups that are designated.
Correct. So I had put the DDA as the managing entity, but we would purchase the cups. It would have a logo, so it's required to have a unique logo. They have to be plastic. They cannot be more than 16 ounces, and they're intended for one-time use. One addition that I proposed that is in the operations plan is that the name of the restaurant would also be on each cup.
Do we have, so businesses would have to apply to us to get a resolution of support for them to participate, correct?
That is correct.
And do we have discretion over which businesses we support? Because, for example, if we have a particular business that has a record of serving to underage, for example, could we consider that as part of whether we decide to support their participation?
Yes, and actually, the Liquor Control Commission has a template that would be completed, and there is a section that says, if the city votes no, a reason why.
Okay.
So yes, you do have discretion.
In an emergency, can we suspend it?
We can
There is-
repeal it at any time, can't
Well-
we?
You
Or
could
the
repeal
whole
it any
social
time.
district.
It would require one public hearing, but
But-
there's no specific suspension rules. There's no ability to pilot it. We just have to rely on the flexibility that city council, through one public hearing, could rescind it, even if it's for a short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, my concern about that is if it's an emergency, I'm not sure what that would look like, but if it happens that it's an emergency, a hearing would slow things down, right? It would have to be noticed, and we might have to have special meetings. Meetings are less frequent in the summer. So that was the basis of my question. If, ideally, or conceivably, you could have a situation where in an emergency, well specified, the city manager could say, we're not allowing this for the next period. But it sounds like that's not contemplated under state law.
I would want to look through the legislation, and I can get back to you on that.
Is it beer only, or is it hard liquor?
It is, hard liquor is allowed. There is a requirement, and I am not the expert, but I believe it cannot exceed so many shots, so it can't be a strong liquor-based drink. But
Okay.
yeah, liquor and wine and beer are allowed.
And if people ignore the rules and bring their own, then it's just an open alcohol violation?
That is correct. Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Meadows?
First of all, who abstained at DDA?
Mayor Brookover and acting city manager Kathy DeChambeau.
And the 7 licensees that are identified in the proposal, Hopcat, Fieldhouse, LAS, Jolly Pumpkin, MASH, Riv. How many licensed facilities do we have in the downtown?
In the central business district or downtown?
Correct, the downtown central business district.
I have a map with that, but I don't have that number off the top of my head.
Okay, but off the top of my head, Harper's would be excluded. The restaurant next to them would be excluded.
As
There are
where the boundaries lie right now,
A number of
yes, they-
exclusions in the downtown who would not be able to participate in this, correct?
If the boundary maintained a smaller quarters, that really was truer to the
Well,
Alberto Fresco road closure.
The RIV is not in the area that we have designated, but it's one of the ones that we're going to permit to participate in this, at least the proposal. Why would we include the RIV?
I think it parallels because our border is at MAC, with it paralleling MAC. It was just part of the proposed boundaries that I had there. When I looked at it, the feasibility of the walkability around, they could go right across the street and stay within the district at MAC to enter into Ann Plaza from MAC. And again, these are just proposed boundaries.
Okay, and then with regard to the enforcement and monitoring, at least on the document we were provided, as I look at it, I guess I'm unclear on how we can enforce this, because I doubt if we're going to have somebody down there or a team of cup checkers that we're going to have in the downtown area. There's nothing that prevents me from getting a cup from, let's say, LS, walking down the street, because I can go anywhere, right? Drinking it, setting it on a bush, walking into 7-Eleven, buying my new beer, putting it in, continuing to walk down. I don't see how this helps the brick and mortar businesses that we have in the downtown area. And it sounds like we had problems with it when we did this before during COVID. Is that correct?
That is correct. And Marcia would be able to better explain how it helps the brick and mortar businesses in the downtown area.
Yeah, and just from my standpoint, looking at the proposal at this point in time, that's not to make a decision on it, this is just a discussion only. I see the enforcement and monitoring as a very, very difficult thing for us to accomplish. Because I think we're going to end up with the same issue. There's nothing that prevents me from taking that cup home, unless there's somebody, stationed all around the downtown area that, puts the nab on me as I try to take a cup home and then try to use it again. I just don't see it.
Have you been to a social district?
Have I been to a social district? No, I'm just talking about what's being proposed here.
Well,
I mean, I know a lot about our downtown, so.
I've been to Rio Town's events, and I haven't been out at late at night, as my colleagues know, I like to go to bed
I don't
early.
think you and
but
I would be the likely ones to try to job the system, okay? But there are plenty of people who would. So that's all I'm talking
Yeah.
about. When I say I mean, pretend I'm somebody else. So just the idea of, and who pays for the logo, the cups, the development of the cups? Is that the bar owners themselves?
So should council support the establishment of the district, I would take the request to the DDA to allocate a budget that would then be used to implement marketing, getting the signage, cups, and then there are also other ideas of ways to charge for the cups to help offset enforcement costs and things like that. So other conversations are being had, but to answer your question, I would take and I brought that to Thursday's meeting, but they did want to hold off on that part of my motion until they knew that there was designated district.
So the possibility, anyway, that if you want to carry your cup outside, for instance, you will pay a premium for that cup. Is that what you're saying?
Who would pay a premium?
So that the customer would pay a premium for the cup to help defray the expenses?
No, if there was, a few communities have done this where the business has to purchase the cups from the municipality.
Okay. Well, I'll just say, I'm not convinced on this. You know, I'm glad that we're talking about it. If there's, you know, a little more meat on the bones here, you know, I might be more interested in it. But at this point in time, I think there's a little more work that needs to be done on this.
Councilmember Watson, do you have any questions?
Yeah, the social district size, how does that compare to other social districts? It seems small.
It is small.
Go ahead.
It is small, and that was discussed at length at the DDA board meeting. And, you know, because we can't pilot it, that was everybody's first, let's just do it temporary, let's pilot it. Let's start small, let's get the data, and with hopes to expand it in the future. And so I just, you know, as staff looking into this, I do support that, starting small.
So could we possibly see Grand River on the list at some point?
Yes, it is possible.
And do they have any thoughts about feeling left out, or they were just on board with maybe trying this and seeing where it goes?
My chairman owns 2 businesses on Grand River, so he's cognizant that it doesn't support him, but does support the whole district. And I haven't heard any respect of being left out, but I am ongoing with outreach to other businesses, perhaps along Grand River and other parts of the central business district where this possibly could be expanded to.
The cup process, are there, will they be recyclable? Do we have recycle bins in that area for people
We
to
do
toss
have
their
recycle
cups?
bins in that area. In meeting with DPW, it is preferred to look at compostable cups. And that is a common thing that other communities have encouraged and certainly we know are out there. And so we'll look at the costs of what a compostable cup would be. But yes, there are recycle bins out there. And certainly through over time to know if we need more or if what we have is good.
And how did the time frame come about, the 12 to 10 p.m.?
Again, I looked at the feasibility of naturally, you know, so this legislation came out so that communities, you know, have a tool to fit what came out of the pandemic in their own communities. So I looked at this as what naturally fits around the events surrounding Alberta Fresco. And so certainly ending at 10 p.m., but the vast majority is 11 a.m. to midnight, noon to midnight, more definitely longer hours.
I thought the RIV was for college students. Am I wrong on that? Do the college students not frequent the RIV in the summertime?
I'm not entirely sure. I would have to lean on some colleagues on that.
Maybe I'll stop in.
The
and
population is
just
that
stop in and look
frequent
around.
the RIV.
There's some places I fit into and others that I don't, and the RIV just hasn't been one. So I was just curious about that because it seems like we're trying to avoid the students.
And certainly it's just because the district includes businesses doesn't mean that they have to apply, so they can choose not to. There are many districts where dozens of businesses are part of a district and they might only have a handful of participating businesses.
And then is there a money exchange then? What you're mentioning, apply and stuff like that, is there going to be a fee
So
one way or
the
the
way
other?
the legislation is set up, no, there is no money exchange between the municipality and the licensee. They do have fees that they would have to pay the Liquor Control Commission, and that's a $250 permit fee and a $70 inspection fee.
And I'm living in a time where people twist around what really happened. And I believe, as a public health person, it's more and more important for data-driven decisions to be made. So can you help us have some data on what might have occurred during the COVID epidemic, and not through word of mouth, but through actual, we saw this uptick, or community saw this uptick, and just so I can make sense of it and consider the facts on, what happened then and what's relevant to what, might happen now.
May I add on to that request? And also, what is currently happening at the 4 social districts in Lansing? Like, what type of issues that they're seeing?
That's good. And yeah, and even their stuff, is it as the cups as specific? Because like in Vegas, you just grab a plastic cup and you can just roam around from the plastic cup experience on streets from businesses. So it's really interesting to imagine these specific cups, and then other places, it might be the glasses that you get and a
Right.
fill level, but
I know in Reotown it was, this may be dated information, but it was just like a yellow Solo cup with a sticker from the establishment, and that kind of
Correct.
allowed you to walk from one place to another.
I do have an example of Ann Arbor's logoed cup.
Oh, they have
that
a
I-
social district.
Ann Arbor does,
Oh,
yes. So theirs is 11 blocks. They combined
11
their
blocks. You don't say.
State Street and Carytown districts in 2023, so to make it one larger social district. So I do definitely have examples of what these cups most typically look like. But again, that is up to each community. Brighton just has a sticker, so the businesses buy their own certain 16-ounce plastic Solo cup, clear, and put their own sticker on it. In this instance, the way I propose is that, the DDA would purchase the cups pre-printed with the Al Fresco logo.
Sweet. Are you, Dr. Altman, you got more?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer my comments. So I like the idea a lot. I am worried about an uptick in the kinds of things that the chief was describing. We, for some reason, for reasons I don't understand, our downtown is vulnerable to people causing problems at certain late hours. And my understanding in conversations with at least some police is that it tends to be time dependent. So it starts around 10 o'clock up through sort of 9 or so, everything's fine, and then the population shifts. And suddenly you get a bunch of problems arising. And as I say, I don't understand the phenomenon. I don't have hard data in front of me. So I could be wrong on this, but that is my impression. It goes back a ways, sort of when we heard about people revving the motorcycles and the occasional shooting in the downtown. There were concerns about this kind of stuff. So that is my primary concern, is about enforcement of abuse, and it's especially a concern given that we are understaffed at the police department. So that's sort of my big concern. On the other hand, if the community's really, really crying out for this, right, and the work you're doing going out to community associations is really important, because they weighed in on Albert Al Fresco. They wanted it, right, which is one of the reasons I wanted to sort of keep it in its larger size. But if people are saying, yeah, we really want this, then you're getting into competing interests, right? People really want it, but there's some risks. Okay, which way does the balance tilt? That's where I'm at in my head. As part of the data, it would be good to have some data bearing out this idea that something changes around 10 o'clock at night in terms of calls for service in the downtown. Because if that's true, then, I understand that other social districts around the state are open much later, but maybe we need to tailor it for whatever constraints we're facing and say, well, okay, maybe it ends at 9, right? And then families, parents can come down with their kids and have supper and a beer. That'd be great. And then right around the time when things shift, that whole thing shuts down. So I think data on timing and calls for service, if we have it, or any other sort of evidence on that issue, basically establishing that there is there's a time window where we can expect, by and large, civilized behavior out of this, right? That's kind of what I'm interested in. And if we can lock that down, then that would mean a lot in terms of my thinking about this.
I just have a couple of follow-up questions. And although some have been set, so the dates and hours we can control,
That is correct.
and the geographic footprint.
The city
Correct.
can control.
Yes. Okay. And then on the cups, so some of the highlights that Dr. Altman, we could curtail the time, which may also assist in kind of monitoring how things unfold downtown. We could print cups with different dates, meaning maybe it's week 1. It's like I'm in summer camp mode with my kid. Like there's week 1, week 2, all through the summer. I'm making this up. It becomes more logistically, but
I hear
so
you.
people aren't reusing cups, for instance. I'm just throwing that out as an idea. As
Like
we're,
when you're at a fair and the red band only gets you on the rides on Thursday, you got to get the white band for rides on the Friday.
Exactly. Like we can do hard things. We can solve for some of these items. So I wanted to bring up that idea. I wanted to also mention that in my capacity as the council liaison to the Arts Commission, this is something that we've, talked about. It would be great to do gallery walks. And it would be great, and this is, I know, I've been an advocate for El Fresco. I think everyone in this room definitely knows that. But, can we go from Metro Space down to Crunchies, where you hit the MSU, FCU, where they have also a gallery as well. That is a for instance. I'm sorry, I look at the chief and she's not giving me a mean eye or anything. And it's gearhead. That was the word I was looking for before on the noise violation piece, gearhead. Okay, so I wanted to mention that Arts Commission. The last thing, and they were really excited about having a glass of wine and being able to go from exhibit to exhibit. And the last thing I'll mention, in my prior capacity at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, we do, in the state of Michigan, have a population challenge, and we talk about retaining our young people and young professionals. And one of the things that come up, it's not just the job. Actually, the job is further down the list. It's stickiness within communities. It's the culture, the amenities, the arts, the other opportunities that really drive people wanting to be in a community. So this is why I continue to be excited, at least trying this out for size. So I appreciate all the engagement, Marcia, and I know you're, month 1 on the job?
Week 7.
Week 7, okay, we're almost at 2 months. So I really appreciate all the work that you're doing and engagement, but I think some of the questions that you heard tonight, if we can find some creative answers and work together, I think there could be a really feasible plan here. Yes, Mr. Meadows.
Just a couple of more comments. One, I'll just note that with the exception of the rib, I think, every one of ours, well, maybe MASH also, every one of these has outdoor seating already. They have of some kind. LAS is on the roof, but was there any discussion at DDA about requesting the ability to expand the outdoor seating for each of these establishments, which may accomplish part of what we're talking about here, other than you can't wander around the downtown? That's one question. The second question is with regard to what you're seeking from the city attorney in terms of how this can be enforced and what those issues might be. Right now, each one of these establishments can be penalized for over-serving, for serving minors, for doing a number of things which would be more difficult in a social district, I think. And I just want from the city attorney, when you ask this question, as to how we would continue to enforce, because in the past, when the city has tried to challenge, a restaurant or a bar that has repeatedly violated both the liquor control rules and local ordinances, it has been a long and laborious process for us. It mentions here that the MLCC would be notified of the violation and efforts may be taken to recommend the revocation. That is a tough process. I just want that process to be discussed at the time that we're discussing whether we're going to go forward with this. Okay.
Thank you. We will work on that. And I think that also warrants additional conversations and asking similar questions to the Liquor Control Commission, because most of this does stay in their hands over oversight and enforcement. And so we'll get more information from that agency as well.
And let me ditto what was said about welcome to East Lansing.
Thank
And, it's great that you're here. And I know it's only 7 weeks, but really looking forward to everything you can accomplish.
All right, last call on this topic before we move forward. Are we good? All right, thank you both. All right. Agenda item 6.3, discussion of green infrastructure code audit. We have our very own Cliff Wells. Welcome to the dais.
Thank you. Cliff Walls, DPW. Thanks for having me. I don't have a ton additional prepared beyond the memo. I did throw together some slides this afternoon, but I come before you to take your temperature on something that I think is an opportunity, and we are at a unique time with the decennial review of the ordinance, or just our approach with that, the presence of the Green Code Study Committee, and just the broader conversation about the suitability of our codes, where can we improve, just taking a look at everything. So I think the time is here. So just to start off, what I'm asking for is your interest in a green stormwater infrastructure code audit. Just to level set, green stormwater infrastructure is, a range of methods or approaches to managing stormwater in a more natural way, mimicking natural processes, soil and plant systems, but it's not exclusively that. It can be different substrates, anything that we're focusing on infiltrating, capturing, storing, managing stormwater in place versus shipping it down into our surface waters. It's something that I'm sure you have heard and read over the years in our various plans. This is the type of thing that our community values. And the reason for that, it's typically because it's a triple bottom line benefit. It's not just the environmental or regulatory component that speaks to people. It makes for a healthier, more valuable community. You're talking about property values and quality of life and more green space. It's something that people desire. Tree-lined streets, rain gardens, bioretention, those things are all good for other reasons, but they are something that resonate with people. And I think we all recognize that in East Lansing. And they're often lower for life cycle cost than your typical gray infrastructure. The issue, and the reason I bring up a green stormwater infrastructure code audit, is a lot of communities in the Midwest and around the country have legacy language baked in their code that serve as codified barriers to green infrastructure implementation. A lot of those are not nearly as obvious as they may seem. For some, it's just a missed opportunity to communicate the preferences of the community. Some of them are outright barriers based on the existing language. And just for an example, generally, pretending you're any community, not necessarily East Lansing, say a resident or a developer wants to utilize porous interlocking concrete pavers. Permeable asphalt is not quite as good, it's very high maintenance, but the interlocking pavers are good solutions. But the code says surfacing must be 6 inches of asphalt or concrete. Right there is, either a barrier to that implementation, that's something they want to do that is towards a goal that the community values, but it's also a missed opportunity. You know, some communities may say, well, we should require this as an option. And I think that's probably a step too far in that case. But at least opening up the code with language that communicates, encourages, or at least, very least, enables these alternatives is a way to achieve not just water quality goals, but some of those triple bottom line benefits. You can probably move to, the next slide. I think I jumped ahead. But some examples, additional examples, prescriptive landscaping standards. You see it all around the state where it says you must have 3 2-inch evergreen trees planted and X shrubs and, that kind of prescriptive language. And again, I'm not really speaking about East Lansing in particular, just the common barriers that exist. Those type of prescriptive mandates for landscaping are barriers to more creative native plant bioretention. If you want to put in a rain garden to meet your landscaping requirements as part of a new development, as part of your site plan process, that language can be important. And it doesn't necessarily have to mandate that you consider alternatives, but there's options to tweak that language or just add on to it that says, the same prescriptive language that I just highlighted, or, variations off of this language or off this code can be considered for vegetative stormwater management features or measures. Curb and gutter mandates for parking lots around the islands, around the perimeter. There may be a developer that wants to meet their stormwater regulatory compliance by creating innies instead of outies as an imperfect term for the islands, versus popping them up and then shedding water, using that area for a depressed vegetative stormwater cell. Innie versus an outie. Same with the perimeter curbing or curb cuts. So some of these things that hide out in the code that are not so obvious and some very less obvious than the ones that I've identified here is something that it can be a barrier to green infrastructure implementation. And for the last few years, actually, when I was on the Commission on the Environment before I started working here, it was something that we were talking about as a commission. We've talked about it with the planning department as well. A professional code audit being something that would be desirable, like a line-by-line review of every part of the code, looking for places where green infrastructure, or the code is either neutral, supportive, or prohibitive of green infrastructure implementation. The reason I bring it to you now is, one, when we first started talking about this with planning, they felt it was very important, which I agreed, to wait until the comp plan was finalizing, because that's a way to communicate what the community's goals are and for us to be able to respond accordingly, which I think would be an important component of, the solution component of the audit. And hopefully I'm making sense here. I didn't prepare enough. I'm just flying. Also, the review that the council and staff are undergoing of the entire code, and what else? I had another note here on that. Of the Green Stormwater, or the Green Code Study Committee, which has been reviewing stormwater standards and making recommendations. That's an existing sounding board, a group that we could use for stakeholder feedback. So it seems like the time is kind of right here. But before pursuing this any further, I said I want to take your temperature, see if this is something that would dovetail the existing efforts for this code review that you're undergoing. What else did I want to mention here? Oh, so the important part is not just identifying the barriers, but it's identifying what we want to put in their place. And so that would be something that a professional firm can do and does for many of our peers. The SEMCOG has undergone or supported a membership-wide, I'm not sure if every single SEMCOG member, but SEMCOG was behind a similar effort. Milwaukee has done this, the Madison Sewerage District, some others in Michigan, Southeast Michigan, and some in Southwest Michigan. And you work with planning experts, GSI, Green Stormwater Infrastructure experts, who are familiar with national best practices, not just in the best management practices related to the actual technology, if you want to call it technology, but how it interacts holistically as municipal code.
That's great.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think
They're
so.
around like
I'm
$20,000
gonna-
to $35,000 to do professionally.
Yeah.
So that's
Right, and it is tight time. I'm gonna kick things off, Mr. Meadows, excuse me.
Good.
The short answer is yes. I think now is the time. We're only gonna see more significant events of rainfall, and I think educating ourselves in terms of the best places to ensure our code is gonna support our end game in terms of outcomes. I think it's a great time to move forward. So that's my quick brief. Now I will kick it over to Mr.
I'll be
Meadows.
even briefer. You know, you want my temperature? It's warm, very warm,
Okay.
as to what you want to do.
Another joke by Mr. Meadows. Ms. Watson.
Yeah, I think it sounds great. I just am curious about the Green Code Study Committee and what their task was, and if it's appropriate for them to transition into a steering committee, and that maybe it should be a more transparent, process or group where we can kind of see the notes or discussion or something like that. But I think it sounds great, and I would, be in support of visiting it for sure.
Yeah, so for the Green Code Study Committee, that was formally created by the Planning Commission, as I understand it. There's representatives from the Building Board of Appeals, Transportation Commission, Planning Commission, and the Commission on the Environment. And their initial charge was to, and council. And the initial charge was to take a look at the stormwater development standards and see if there were opportunities for, being more aggressive. But part of it was looking just at the overall code, or being a sounding board for the overall code for like tree plant or the tree ordinance. I have some ideas for that, and we're bringing that next to tighten up our tree protection ordinance. The multifamily recycling, which is something we're hearing about in the community, amenities at apartment complexes. Maybe we need to update the code from the 2007 update. So there's discussions about bringing that to the Green Code Study Committee. I know zoning, planning and zoning, Landon has a bunch of ideas. So it's kind of a whatever we throw at them, because it's a good cross-section of various commissions that touch, this type of work. So I think it'd be a natural fit, but in terms of notes and all of that, we can definitely consider or do whatever is requested. But I think probably within the month, or I guess you guys have summer schedule, but soon the recommendations will be coming from that group on the stormwater development standards. They've made recommendations and instructed staff, or supported staff moving in the direction of the committee. We're just preparing the materials and some of these policy drafts to bring before this body. So they've been very active. They're just kind of at this, frankly, waiting on me to find time to finish what they told me to do.
Thank you.
Dr. Altman.
I think that committee is subject to the Open Meetings Act, is that right?
I would imagine so.
I think the meetings are noticed and so forth, so they're
Landon
perfect.
handles more of the administrative side, but I can ask him for clarity.
Yeah,
But
I
I
would-
believe so.
I would think so. So this would be a place potentially to look for opportunities to insert green roofs, which is something that somebody in the audience has been talking about since fall of 2023. This potentially is something that would come up in the course of that code audit as something that would find
Yes,
a
sir.
natural home in certain places.
Yes, certainly.
Okay. It sounds like there's sort of different levels at which you can set the consultant, sort of, eliminate the stuff we don't want in there to aggressively promote our strategic priorities, for example. Is that how we would handle that? We would ask the consultant to sort of be more or less aggressive in terms of how they suggested edits to the code?
I think, this would be something we would bid out and find the consultant to do whatever the wish of the council is.
Yep.
So I think, we could approach it in a variety of ways. I would imagine that there would probably be a suite of options, or of like, here's the easy fix, remove this language,
Right.
turn, speaking of surfacing, cross out paved and put improved. So you're not exclusively limiting it to like pavement, all the way up to, requiring a certain level of reservoir and infiltration per that, for that alleyway or whatever surfacing you're talking about. So I think there'd be options. It's, entirely up to what we decide and what we want to pay them for, I think.
Well, we have our strategic priorities right there. There are certainly strong environmental strategic priorities there, and we made a promise to the community after the storms last summer, right, to keep this ball rolling, and so that is also a priority, right, I think, for all of us, and we're all sort of keeping that in the back of our minds, and when you think about that and sort of the promise we made, I think the timing really is actually really good for this now. So I say full speed ahead.
Excellent. Additional comments or questions from council? Cliff, any closing words for us?
Not tonight.
Okay, very good.
Do you have what you need in terms of
Yeah.
guidance?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, before I got on the trail, that you guys gave me your blessing, so. I'll take it from
I
here.
think you heard it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this.
Very good. Thank you. All right. That concludes the agenda. Do we have a motion?
Move to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Needs a second.
Second.
Oh, I was like shocked no one did second that. Okay. We have a second by Ms. Watson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Adjourned.